Now let's talk about effective communication. I've been wondering about effective communication. Well, the FAA wants you to know there are 3 elements to effective communication. First of all, there is the source, that's the person sending the message. Then there's the symbols used to transmit the message, and finally there's the receiver. Now, what symbols are we using to transmit that message? We're using words. That's what we're using right there. And the effectiveness of communication between an instructor and a student is measured by the similarity between the idea transmitted and the idea received. Hopefully they are the same idea, but it doesn't always happen that way. Now, as an instructor, you'd like to communicate effectively. How do you do that? Well, one way you do it is to reveal a positive attitude towards yourself, towards the ideas being communicated, and towards the receivers while delivering the message. And that way you have enhanced and much more effective communication. Now, the most successful communicator is one who has a varied communicative approach and speaks or writes from a background of up-to-date, stimulating material. Is this up-to-date stimulating material? Well, it's up-to-date. I don't know whether it's stimulating or not. So that's what the most successful speaker does, speaks or writes from a background of up-to-date stimulating material, and they understand the material and they have a depth of background in it. Now, let's assume that a listener has difficulty in understanding the symbols the speaker is using, and he indicates confusion. What's likely to happen? I'll tell you what's likely to happen. The speaker can become puzzled and uncertain, because if you have a classroom full of people, and I know this from experience, by the way, you have a classroom full of people who all of a sudden look like they don't understand, the speaker gets confused because they don't know what they said wrong. Now, guess who's confused? Everybody's confused. How do you get out of that? You get out of that by asking the people a few questions to see what it is that you said that was so confusing. Now, if on the other hand, a listener reacts favorably, then the speaker's encouraged and force is added to the communication. I remember one time I had a guy in class, in a 2-day ground school class, and every time I said something, he looked at me, he smiled, he nodded, his eyes met mine, and I thought, boy, I am really getting through to this guy, and I was encouraged, and I had more force added to my communication. Now, the problem is when I talked to the guy later on, he didn't understand one thing I was saying. He was just very good at social skills, but he sure encouraged me, that's all. Okay, now let's take a look at effective communication. How do you know when effective communication has taken place? Well, it has taken place only when the receivers react with understanding, and according to the FAA, and this is a big deal with the FAA, change their behavior. I bet you saw that coming accordingly. That's when you have effective communication. You know, the FAA kind of has a silly idea that you as an instructor ought to be able to tell when instruction has taken place. You see, the problem is you can present all the material, and the student might hear it all, but you still don't know whether instruction took place until you get the desired response from the student. So how do you know when instruction has taken place? Well, when a procedure has been explained and the desired student response has occurred. Now let's talk about barriers to effective communication, things that keep you from having effective communication. Well, one of those barriers is the lack of a common level of experience between the instructor and the student. And that's probably the single greatest barrier to effective communication, because, you know, a communication can only be effective to the extent that the experiences, the physical, the mental or emotional experiences of the people concerned are similar. And a communicator's word cannot communicate the desired meaning to another person unless the listener or reader has some experience with the objects or concept to which these words refer. So the answer to that is choose your words very, very carefully. Make sure that you have words that other people will understand, not words that are very pleasing to you. A lot of people do that. Let's talk about another barrier to effective communication, and that is confusion between the symbol, between the thing being symbolized and the symbol itself, and that's a barrier to effective communication. Good presenters remember that words are only symbols, and that they choose words that have appropriate meaning to the listener. Now, another barrier to effective communication is the overuse of abstractions. Holy mackerel, isn't that what we're doing right here? Yes, you bet it is. Concrete words that refer to objects that human beings can experience directly are far better than abstractions. In other words, folks, get real. Use real things. And unfortunately, this subject has a lot of abstractions in it. That's the way the FA is. Now, what's the danger in using abstract words? The danger is that an abstract word will not evoke in a listener or reader's mind the specific items of experience that the communicator intends. In other words, they may be two different things.